Hello, teachers. My name is Jane Viau, and I'm delighted to be here tonight with so many intelligent and energetic and passionate colleagues. This is my 11th year this year teaching, and I teach high school mathematics and economics in Harlem. I wasn't always a teacher. I found my calling later in life, but now I truly can't imagine doing anything else. What we do is so meaningful and so powerful and so far-reaching. So now I'm going to share with you a little bit about how I got started. I love being a teacher, but I didn't always know that this is what I wanted to be. I am the child of political refugees from the former communist Czechoslovakia. There's me and my parents. We grew up as immigrants with very little money. We didn't have a TV at home. Most of my clothes came from the Salvation Army, or they were homemade. As you can see, my mom fashioned some lovely matching dresses out of towels. So when I was growing up, I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew one thing for sure, and that was that I wanted to have financial security and independence. My dad was my role model as I was growing up. The man had a really strong work ethic. And I witnessed our family going from poor immigrants to middle-income homeowners. And so my reality proved to me that in this country, hard work is genuinely recognized and rewarded. So in my teen years, when it came time to think about college and where I was going to go, what I was going to study, I, like everyone else, had to figure out how I was going to go about making that decision. Raised by my East European parents, I knew that I was not comfortable taking on any kind of debt. And so for that reason, I said no to expensive Cornell, and instead I went to a much more reasonably priced state school. And then I took on the usual cashier jobs in like department stores and grocery stores to raise my tuition money. Knowing that I was good at math, I liked numbers, I decided to go into a business program and focus on finance. And here I really excelled. And I discovered that I really loved complex data analysis. So when I graduated, I took a job with a major insurance company in New York City. And that segued on to a position with a credit rating agency and ultimately with an investment bank. I continue to work full-time, and in my spare time, in the evenings, I got my MBA part-time, and that was at my company's expense. So once again, I avoided those loans. I was getting more and more responsibilities. I was involved with multi-million and even billion-dollar deals. I had a staff. I was, as you can see here, climbing the proverbial corporate ladder. This seemed to impress people because especially at this time, this is a couple decades ago, there were not a lot of female executives on Wall Street. So I had to work like even that much harder just to be taken seriously as a young female. I had my own office, you can see there. I had a secretary. Everyone kept telling me that I was living the life. But to me, something just didn't feel right. Something was missing. And I felt many, many days with the gray ethics that investment banking demands that I had to make a choice when I went into work. I felt like I had to choose between being a good employee by my company standards or being a good person by my own standards. And this was a dichotomy that was getting very difficult to resolve in my own head. And it was literally getting hard to sleep at night, literally. And I distinctly remember the morning of my 36th birthday when the alarm went off, and I laid there, hitting snooze, dreading going in for another 16-hour day. And these lyrics kept popping in my head from a song many of you may recognize by the Talking Heads. And the lyrics go, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? So you see back here where it looks like really cool, right? And I have this clean desk and my feet are up on it like I'm chilling. That's when you get the promotion. And then reality hits, right? Look at the look on my face. That's what it felt like. So I was like working around the clock. I had no life to speak of. And all in the meanwhile, like what I was working on didn't really have any meaning. And we weren't curing cancer, let's face it, right? And most days I wasn't sure we were doing any good at all. And so I said to myself, like, I can't do this. And I quit. And people thought I was really nuts. People thought I lost it. My parents were worried. My friends thought that I was going to regret giving it all up. My boss actually at the time told me in confidence that she secretly wished that she could quit, but she felt the golden handcuffs. And I just really didn't care what anyone else thought. I felt reborn. My first stop was as a fundraiser for a nonprofit organization that raised funds for AIDS-related research and services. And my life now had meaning. My work had meaning. And I very, very happily did this for a year, thinking I was going to do this for quite some time. And then the unthinkable happened. And you will remember this. 2 planes flew into the World Trade Center. That was a block away from my former office. And down with those towers went thousands of people that used to work in my industry. Talk about a loud wake-up call. I decided that day that just now raising money for doing good deeds, that was not enough. Life is too short. I decided that I had to get in the trenches, get my hands dirty, and do some good work myself. So 1 year later, I was standing in front of a classroom in Harlem, New York, teaching algebra, and I have never looked back. When I first started, my compensation was 10% of the compensation package that I gave up on Wall Street. I didn't care. Then and now, I felt richer in all the ways that matter to me. I teach content. I teach mathematics, economics, even advanced placement classes, but we all know that our job involves so much more than teaching content. For the past several years in my advanced placement statistics classes, my students have had 85 to 95% pass rates, and that compares to a national average of just 59%. My students have scored, it goes from 1 to 5, have scored anywhere between 3.2 and 4.2, and that compares to a national average of 2.8, and for African Americans, 1.8. So we're blowing the national averages away, and that is a huge accomplishment for my students. Many of my students come back and visit me. They keep in touch. I love getting their emails with all their updates in their lives and the big, huge hugs when they come to visit. And each time that happens, it just reinforces to me that the impact that we have is really, really long lasting, well past the time that these kids are sitting in our 4 walls learning about our content. And I always think to myself, like, how many middle managers really have former employees coming back and thanking them for their leadership? I was a middle manager. That does not happen. That's my motivation right there. Teaching the populations of students that I've chosen to teach in the inner city, it requires a lot of dedication and stamina and consistency. I'm used to all of that from my old career. I am certainly no foreigner to long hours and to hard work. The difference now is I care about the end product. My clients now are my students, and these stakeholders, they deserve the very best that I have to offer on their behalf. So I'd like to share with you my teaching philosophy. My AP students, yes, they're among the best in our school, okay? But let's be real about this. They're not advanced by any of the normal standards, okay? In most suburban high schools, they would certainly be considered lower functioning. So what does that mean? The math skills that they bring to the table, they're seriously lacking. And the organizational skills and the study skills that they come to me with, it's like non-existent. So they need more instruction. They need more guidance. They need more encouragement. They need more of me. That takes time, but that's what's needed to level the playing field for my students. So how do I do this? Well, my AP students are required to sign what I call an academic contract, and that's where they and their guardians make certain commitments. They have to meet with me mandatory after school sessions and Saturday sessions. They have to agree to meet with me during school breaks. Why? We're making up for lost years. That's why. If my students are willing to make this journey with me, then I'm certainly willing to work as hard as I ever did in banking on their behalf. So what do we do during all this extra time? Well, that's when we worked on all the soft skills, the stuff that's not content. We talk about note-taking, how to write reusable notes. We talk about time management. We talk about test-taking strategies. We talk about study skills. And a lot of times, the kids or I bring in current events that deal with the concepts in statistics or economics that we've been talking about in class. And that makes it a lot more engaging for them, and they see the relevance in what they're learning. And another thing is that my students definitely come to me with, unfortunately, poor writing skills. And this is a problem because in AP courses, which is something we were talking about today with the Common Core curriculum coming, the students are required to be able to write and communicate effectively. So what they have to do, they have to be able to explain their procedure, why they use that procedure, what their analysis was, what decision they made, and why. So we spend a lot of time dissecting and critiquing sample student writing samples so that they get to understand and be able to identify what good writing actually looks like. But in order to get my kids to make this level of commitment to me, I clearly have to demonstrate my commitment to them. So I take time to get to know them outside of class, right? So I go to their debate and their theater and their sports event and their band concert so that they see that I'm taking an interest in them as a person and not just for my class. I make sure that they understand that I'm available during lunch, after school, during free periods, so they can come and ask questions or just talk about personal problems. And speaking of personal problems, I listen to their struggles, and they can be intense. I teach in Harlem. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of gangs. There's a lot of drugs. There's just some serious stuff that kids should not even know about, let alone be living through. And honestly, I get my inspiration from them because if I was in their shoes, I don't know that I would wake myself up and come to school every day. I don't know that I would have the intestinal fortitude to do what a lot of them do. It's incredibly impressive. So at first, because I am very demanding with my time, the students, for a good part of the year, till about now in the school year, yeah, they think I'm a crazy bitch that wants to monopolize their life. They really do. They're like, you're in my face all the time, could you please go away? But what I'm modeling is hard work. You know, maybe they have never seen that from a relative or anyone at home. And slowly, they begin to realize that my motivations lie with their success, not with my own track record. It's all about them. And they start to draw their own conclusions about my sincerity. And it's really only until that sinks in that I start to see them slowly, one by one, meeting me halfway. And somebody told me when I first started teaching, I didn't quite get it then, what they said to me was, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Man, that's true. For a decade I've been doing this. That's true. My mantra is persistence. So even when my students do not initially meet my expectations, I do not lower them. I simply and calmly explain where we need to get, where we really should be, and where we are. And they need to know. This is why we have to put in all this extra time. I'm always pushing students up to the next level, keeping my eye on that ultimate goal. Eventually, the students begin to expect more of themselves, and then they start having little achievements, and those achievements become a self-fulfilling prophecy. However, at various points throughout the year, this happens every year, there are meltdowns. Kids break down, they say it's too hard, they can't do it, they want to quit. I won't have it. I will not let a kid quit the class. Basically, I explained to them that yes, they can absolutely do this if they're willing to put in the time and effort. And that's all it takes, is the time and the effort. You have to have the desire. And these are the crucial moments, I believe, that build character. So this may involve a lot of heart-to-hearts, a lot of psychology we got to play. It oftentimes involves reaching out to parents and guardians. But let's face it, in the neighborhood I teach in, the parents or guardians may or may not value education. They may or may not even know what an AP class is or understand why it's important. It definitely means spending a lot more time with that kid, bridging gaps in understanding, pulling them up to where they need to be, and providing tons and tons of encouragement. I know that a lot of my students are not going to pursue careers where they use a lot of statistics and economics. I understand that. They might not even use math. But the point is to get them to a place where they're willing to accept a really tough challenge and see it through. So that's why all these preventative measures, because I do not want to let them quit. Because if I let them quit, then they're just going to face another failure like so many before that, and I'm not having it. So I'd like to share with you a great source of pride for me. My buddy, I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but you know, Dave Brown. Dave was a student of mine. When he came into class, you see he's a big guy, right? So he comes in class, he sits down, and he's like, yo, Miss V, I want you to know something. What he wanted me to know is that the only reason, sole solitary reason that he was in my class was so he could pad up his transcript so he could get into a Division I school so that he could play basketball for the NBA. That was his plan. And that was the only reason he was going to be putting up with me and putting up with my class, right? And I just had to deal with that, apparently. Or so he thought, right? He didn't know me yet. So they was really pushed academically that year. I don't think he saw it coming. And he rebelled. Yeah, he rebelled. He didn't like it. He didn't like having me trying to get him to think. He didn't like my deadlines. He certainly didn't like my workload. He tried to hand in projects late. I explained that I do not accept any work after the deadline. He was surprised. He asked me if he could make up failed tests. I explained there's a no do-over policy in a college class. So each time we had one of these tough love sessions, I kept explaining to Thay that I fully believed that this intelligent but lazy young man was going to succeed. I firmly believed and expected that this kid was going to be able to do it. Slowly, he came to rise to the challenge. And I'll never forget the day that he exclaimed, like it was some big surprise. He goes, yo, Miss V, you be wildin', because other teachers just tell me to like write stuff down and memorize it. You want me to think? Yeah. By the middle of the year, Thay was instrumental in actually running a student-led petition to ask the administration if I could add on another AP class, AP Microeconomics, the following year. By the end of that year, he had enrolled not only in that new class, but also in AP Calculus. And eventually, he ended up getting a score high enough on all 3 of those tough AP exams to earn college credit. So while he was in that first really demanding class that kicked his butt, Thay found something, the love of learning. I don't think he even knew that it could be fun and cool. And he realized that he could absorb complex material. I think he surprised himself, honestly. And he began to change. Now, Thay is a junior in college. He's a Posse Scholarship winner, and he's majoring in economics. He's not going to play basketball for the NBA. He came to visit my students last year. And when he showed up at the door, I thought he was like a substitute or something. Like, I didn't know who he was, right? I looked up and I'm like, yeah, who's the dude? And he was this like well-dressed, articulate, poised, confident, successful young man. it just brought me to tears. The kids were like, Miss V, you all right? Like, what's going on? Why are you crying? You know, and it was just like, that's my little Faye. Look at that. And he shared two great pearls of wisdom with my students that day. The first thing he said was, get the most you can out of your high school education. Push your teachers, make them teach you, because you're getting this for free. And after this, seriously, every time you want to learn something and every time you want to ask for help, you're going to have to pay for it. And the second thing he said with them is, do not waste time. It was kind of one of those do what I say, not what I did things. Because he was like, get as much out of this as you can and get as solid a foundation as you can so that then when you make that transition to a college workload, it's not going to be as much of a shock to your system. Students oftentimes ask me why I became a teacher, and particularly once they hear what it is that I used to do. To them, it's like unfathomable, right? To like give up what they consider to be, ooh, the fancy job with, ooh, the big paycheck, right? So, you know, I had to struggle with how do I explain this, you know, and since many of them are into rap and the spoken word, I sort of decided that that would be a good way that they would understand why I chose to do this. So this is how I answer the question, and I will share this with you now as my closing. I used to make money like honey, sweet bonus dollars and Ralph Lauren collars. A corner office, I was no novice. The work, it was complex. My mind had a flex. I had to work late, concentrate, never hesitate. But then I grew weary. The work was so dreary. And so I took a look around and I heard the sound of a purpose calling. A wasted mind is an unacceptable find. We have to suture our broken future. So now I have the itch to enrich young minds. I teach, I reach, I relate, I motivate, I educate. I used to make money. Now, I make a difference. Thank you.